Narcissists are extremely manipulative people. They practice almost every minute of every day manipulating other people into doing what they want. And many of them have become master manipulators by taking advantage of normal human emotions and vulnerabilities. So why is it when we fall for a narcissist's manipulations, so many of us will feel like we were stupid to have done so? In today's video, I want to break down what it is that can make some of us so hard on ourselves and how hopefully I can help you look at this a little differently. Welcome to Looking Behind the Mirror, where we explore narcissism and take our lives back as we make sense out of nonsense. As a quick disclaimer, everything I say is based on my opinions and my personal experiences. I'm not a professional, and if you're really struggling, I encourage you to seek professional help. I am providing links below for you. So there are a couple different stages to ways that we can be made to feel stupid for falling for the narcissist. The first is falling for the narcissist in the first place. Some of us can really beat ourselves up for falling for the love bombing or believing that this person really loved us and all this. And then some of us can really beat ourselves up for staying after the red flags started showing up, or after we started being mistreated, or maybe even going back after we'd already left. So I'm going to address these two different ways we can beat ourselves up and feel stupid in two halves of this video. So first, falling for the narcissist in the first place. It's important to remember that before we encounter a pathologically narcissistic person, or before we understand that that's the kind of person we're dealing with, we only have our own reference, our own perspective to understand the world through. And it is perfectly natural to assume that everyone else in the world has at least a similar perspective to ours, that they have similar ways of feeling and reacting to certain things, and that they care about similar things, especially if they act like they do. Narcissists will usually pretend to experience things in the same way or in similar ways to the ways we do. So it's totally natural to assume that if somebody acts like they love you and says that they love you, that they actually love you, because we would never pretend to love someone else. That's not even an idea that would occur to us. So why would we beat ourselves up for believing somebody that acts like they love us and says that they do? Wouldn't it be a little crazy to assume that this person is making this up and pretending to love us and actually is going to try to take over and destroy our life? In order for us to learn that there are people in the world that have completely different motivations to ours, that don't want the same things out of life that we do, that don't want to be loved, that don't want healthy relationships, we really kind of have to be smacked in the face with it. We have to encounter it, and then we have to see it for what it is, because even when we run into this in real life, it isn't presented as what it actually is. We have to spend some time with it and really kind of be forced to see that it is something that we would have never even dreamed up. And the only way to do that is really to fall for it. There's nothing stupid about assuming that other people are somewhat similar to us. There's nothing stupid about trusting somebody else. We need to trust people in order to function in the world. And I really believe that human beings need to be taught that there are certain people out there that they shouldn't trust, that they can't just trust everybody. I really think that this is something that we all have to learn the hard way to some degree, especially those of us that are trustworthy. The only people out there that assume that everyone's up to something, that everyone has an angle, are people that feel that way themselves. So if you have a problem trusting too many people too easily, it's probably because you are an extremely trustworthy person. It's not because you're stupid. And one more element to this is many of us, not all, but many of us that have fallen victim to abusive relationships were taught growing up in our childhood to ignore our intuition. We were told that the ways we feel about things or the feelings we have about people are wrong. Maybe we had an adult in our life that we just didn't feel comfortable around. We didn't like this person, but we were forced to be friendly. Maybe they were a family member or a community leader or a church leader, and we were told that our feelings were wrong, that this person was really great and awesome, and that we should let them hug us, or whatever it was we were uncomfortable with. We were told in childhood growing up that we needed to trust people that we had bad feelings about. That happened to a lot of us. And also, many of us were taught to blame ourselves for things that weren't going right with us. When we were being mistreated by the adults in our lives or the peers in our lives, many of us were told to blame ourselves. We were asked what we did to contribute to the problem, especially if it was an adult that people didn't want to confront. We were told to just go along with what they said, just mind them, or don't talk back, or whatever. We were told to blame ourselves for things that went wrong, to not recognize when people were mistreating us, and to ignore our intuition. And we have to unlearn that as adults, and unfortunately many of us have to unlearn it the hard way by really understanding what happens when we ignore our gut feelings, understanding that we aren't wrong to expect people to treat us right, and that we have a right to set boundaries, and we don't have to be friends with people that make us uncomfortable. And having to unlearn things we were conditioned to accept in childhood doesn't make anyone stupid. Love and acceptance is a human need. We need love and acceptance. And if we grew up in an environment in which gaining love and acceptance meant going along with what people wanted us to do, wanted us to think, wanted us to pretend, then that was our survival mechanism. We had to go along with what we were told to go along with in order to survive or get our very basic needs met. So just as an example, if there was a church leader that made us uncomfortable, or we knew that they were lying about certain things, but we were told, you have to respect this person, you have to believe what they're saying, you're wrong, and if you don't accept this, you're going to be rejected by the community. I mean, as a kid, that's like a survival threat. So of course you're going to learn to just go along with what people are telling you to go along with. And that lack of confidence carries over into adulthood. And that inability to trust our own gut and that inability to feel like we have a right to set our own boundaries carries over into adulthood. And narcissists can see that in people that have an especially big problem with it. And they take advantage of it, and it works. And if that's something that you struggle with, that is not your fault, and it is not a reflection of your intelligence. It's a reflection of what you've learned works for you to get your basic needs met. So whether or not you grew up learning this in childhood, or you just happened to run into a narcissist and you didn't see it coming, here comes the narcissist in your life. A type of person that you had no idea existed. A perspective that you have no clue about. Nobody has ever really taught you about how narcissists think, or that they even really exist. Maybe you thought that the word narcissist just means a jerk that thinks that the world revolves around them and spends too much time looking in the mirror. And you don't understand that this is somebody who preys on other people, who hijacks the emotional needs of normal people, who replaces trust with control and manipulation in order to get their own needs met. How are you supposed to know that somebody like this existed? How are you supposed to know that someone who thinks in a completely backwards way from your own, who has backwards needs from your own, how are you supposed to know that this was a thing that you were supposed to be looking out for? I did a reel on Instagram recently where I used the analogy that when you take your car to a mechanic to get your oil changed, you're not supposed to have to worry that the mechanic's gonna cut your brake line or steal your car. And even if they do that to you, it would be a little crazy for you to worry about that, to be suspicious that the mechanic's going to do that to you. This isn't a thing you're supposed to have to worry about. When you meet someone in your life and they seem to be friendly and loving and attentive and they have all these traits you've been looking for, you're not supposed to have to worry that this person is pretending to be something that they're not, that their whole personality is contrived, and that the whole way they feel about you is completely made up, and that they're actually going to take over and ruin your life for no reason. How are you supposed to know that that's a thing? It's like if you go to a restaurant and you order food, are you supposed to worry that they're going to poison your food? I mean, that's just, We have to trust people to a certain degree in order to function in life. And narcissists take advantage of that. That's just not something that we can really blame ourselves for, especially when we don't know that it's a thing. I mean, when you were a kid and you were learning how to read, and then a few years went by and you got really good at reading, you don't go back to the days when you were struggling or the days before you even understood what reading was and think, wow, I sure was stupid back then that I couldn't read this simple book. Because you didn't know, because this was a whole new world to you that was full of foreign concepts. It has nothing to do with your intelligence. And as I was talking about earlier, if you were raised in a narcissistic environment by narcissistic people, this is even worse because this is the only world you know. You were told that people that were negligent or abusive towards you cared about you, that this was what love looks like. And these are the people who you had to learn to get your needs met through. This was the dance you had to dance. And like a fish who lives in water and doesn't know what water is, how could you ever have any perspective? How could you even know that this wasn't healthy, that these types of relationships weren't healthy, if this is all you've ever known? This is the arena that you have learned how to get your needs met through. It's like if you were raised in a remote area and you were only taught to gather water from a raging river, and that's all you ever knew. And you had to learn how to navigate this dangerous raging river in order to collect water, and you got really good at it. I mean, if somebody later came up to you and said, hey, you know, this whole time that you've grown up and lived next to this raging river, there was a well just like a mile this way. You could have just gone and collected your water from a well and not risked your life in this raging river. I mean, are you stupid? Because how are you supposed to know? This was something that you had no concept of. You couldn't have possibly even conceived of the idea that there was a way to get your needs met in a safe, secure environment. And now, even if you were raised in a safe, secure environment, when we're talking about abusive narcissists, these people are extremely deviant, dangerous people, and this is a foreign concept to us. Monsters, so to speak, are people that we see in documentaries and on movies and we hear about in podcasts. We really aren't meant as human beings to be able to see these people in a realistic light. When somebody becomes familiar to us, when they're a living, breathing human being that maybe we share space with, we work with, they're a family member, or we live with them, we don't see them as a monster, and it doesn't really occur to us how bad their behavior maybe is. I mean, Ted Bundy had plenty of friends and coworkers who trusted him. He had a girlfriend. He had a community rallying behind him when he was being accused of the things he had done. People didn't see him as a monster because they were familiar with him. And people really have a hard time conceiving of people they're familiar with being capable of horrible things. Being familiar with someone kind of convinces our brain that they are a, quote, normal person. And this is, again, something that we really have to learn the hard way. We have to learn that people that we trusted, people that acted like they cared about us, people that helped us out when we were in a tough situation, people we have strong feelings for, people we're emotionally attached to, could actually be capable of harming us, hurting us, ruining our life, or worse, and not care. These people might not care about us at all, not care about our welfare, not care what happens to us. This is not something that we're supposed to just assume is possible. If we approached life assuming that everyone might be out to get us, we really wouldn't be able to function. This is just not something that I think is fair to expect of ourselves. Okay, now let's talk about when things start to turn, because a lot of you, when I posted the reel about the auto mechanic, some people said things like, well, what if I keep bringing my car back to the same mechanic then? Then I'm stupid, right? And so I want to talk about when you stay after the red flags pop up, or after the person becomes abusive, or when you go back after you've already left, and why even in that case, it still doesn't mean you're stupid. I first want to ask you to think about when you think you should have known. At what point precisely should you have said to yourself, oh, this is a dangerous abusive relationship and I should end it right now? At what point? The first red flag, the first funny, quirky thing they said that didn't quite make sense? The very first time they insulted you? At what point? Because abusive people very rarely will just come right out the gate and be abusive. They will first show little red flags, little quirky things that don't quite make sense, or they might just say some snide little comment or say some little insulting thing that maybe hurts your feelings a little, but you just kind of brush it off because it seems like an aberration. It seems like a one-off thing that, oh, well, that was weird. Oh, well, they're really great most of the time. Maybe they just weren't thinking and they just said something rude or they did something thoughtless, And you might actually come up with a point, maybe. Maybe you come up with a point like, well, what about that one time where we had that huge fight and they insulted me and yelled at me or whatever? And I would say to that, to really put yourself back in that perspective and remember what things were like then. When things first started going wrong, when you first started seeing signs that this person was mistreating you. I've explained it this way in other videos, but I'm gonna do it again really quickly. Imagine that you're in a relationship where everything is perfect 365 days a year. This person is just, they treat you amazing, the communication is great, you feel cared for and heard and loved, and fireworks are going off in your head every day. It's just wonderful, right? But then imagine that now one day a year, this person just is in a bad mood and they start insulting you and they're mean to you and you can't do anything right and they really hurt your feelings. Maybe they scream at you or do something disturbing that makes you feel unsafe, but it's just one time, and all the rest of the time for the whole year they're just amazing and everything's perfect. I mean, would you end a relationship because one day a year you're not being treated very well or you're being treated really badly even? I don't think that's a real simple question to answer. Well, what if it's 2 days a year? What if 2 days a year you're treated pretty badly, but all the rest of the year is just great and wonderful and awesome? Okay, now what if it's three days a year? What if it's once a month? At what point, as the abuse escalates and becomes more common, where's the line? And how are you supposed to know where that line is? Especially if you're in a relationship where you're being blamed for this, where you're being told, well, of course I'm angry because you did X, Y, and Z. Of course I'm angry because you never listened to me. You don't try hard enough. You did this or you didn't do that. You're being told that it's your fault. Also, at what point do you realize that this person doesn't care about you? If this person is amazing to you 364 days a year and they treat you like garbage once, are you going to assume, wow, this person doesn't care about me at all? This whole relationship is garbage. This person wouldn't care if I dropped dead. I think that would be a little extreme to assume that because they treat you badly one time a year, right? But at what point does it dawn on you that this relationship is pure garbage and that this person is abusive and they're only kind to you to keep you hooked into this abusive cycle? At what point do you see that? And how can you think that intelligence has anything to do with this? These are mind games. This is manipulation that takes advantage of very normal human emotions and vulnerabilities. People from the outside hear these stories usually after the abuse has become really bad. So they're plunged right into the story after things have become dangerous or violent or just clearly abusive and horrible, right? And they didn't see the way that things progressed. I have an analogy I came up with, and I think that it illustrates the familiarity that the victim develops with the abuser and the way that that blinds them to what's really going on. So I want you to imagine that you have an aunt, and I'm going to call her Aunt Mabel, and that she's just this sweet older lady, and every time you guys get together for holiday gatherings, big family holiday gatherings, Aunt Mabel always makes pie for everybody. And it's really good pie, and she's just the nicest lady and everybody enjoys her pie. But then one year a few people get sick, and you kind of figure out that it was the people that ate one of her pies. Okay, like, what do you assume? Something went wrong with the pie. It was an accident. Aunt Mabel accidentally did something that food poisoned a few people. Oops, right? But now, what if this happens again? And then what if 1 year goes by and it doesn't happen? What if sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't? And what if she's always got some reason or some excuse, or maybe somehow she suggests that it was somebody else's meal? But then after a while, you start to wonder if Aunt Mabel is doing this on purpose. But this is such an outrageous thing to think in your head. The rest of the family would think you were nuts to even think of such a thing. But what happens if one day you actually catch her putting something into one of her pies? At what point along this story would it be reasonable for you to even suspect that she had done such a thing? This sweet little old lady that the whole family loves and trusts. That's the same kind of trust and love that most people develop with people that eventually become abusive towards them. And it is the most outrageous idea to even conceive of the notion that this person's going to develop into someone that's going to try to harm us for their own gain with absolutely no care whatsoever as to how it affects us. But if we're watching some true crime documentary about a crazy old lady that poisoned her whole family with her holiday pies, we're jumping into it right at the end, and we already see her realistically for who she really is. And we might wonder, wow, how did those people keep eating those pies after they were already seeing that they were getting sick? Obviously, this crazy old lady was poisoning them, right? But if you were in the middle of it, and you started at the beginning, and you already loved and trusted this person, sometimes the truth is something too crazy to even imagine. And to go back to that car mechanic that I talked about in the beginning of this video, if you took your car to a car mechanic to get your oil changed, you're not supposed to worry that the mechanic's going to cut your brake lines or steal your car. But in this kind of situation, if that's what they do, and you continue to take your car back to them, it's because this mechanic will say things to you like, I didn't cut your brake lines. Are you crazy? When's the last time you had me check your brakes? No wonder they failed. Or how hard do you push on your brakes when you use them? You're probably not driving the right way. You've done this somehow. Or I didn't steal your car. Are you crazy? You never even brought it in. What are you talking about? And these lies make more sense than the actual truth to us, especially if we already have an emotional attachment to this person and we already trust them with our lives. We want to believe the explanations. We want to believe the lies because they make more sense to us. And a lot of times these situations, the truth is heartbreaking. It's devastating. And often it means that we have to do something really difficult that's going to completely change and uproot our lives. So we want to believe the excuses. And also, when we're told to blame ourselves, in a weird way, a lot of us want to blame ourselves, because if we can blame ourselves, it means that we have some kind of control over this. If this is really our fault, then that means that we can fix it. Because if all of this is happening because of things we need to change about ourselves, then all we need to do is change ourselves to fix it, right? We're not going to have to uproot our whole life and do something heartbreaking and do the hard thing because we have control over this because it's our fault, right? Holding on to hope for something that means so much to us doesn't mean that we're stupid. It means that the relationships in our lives mean something to us, and it means that we want to avoid unnecessary pain if possible. And that's a perfectly normal human emotion. Giving up hope in a hopeless situation is just acceptance of something that we can't change. It's a realization. It's not a sign of intelligence. Being in denial about something very painful does not mean you're stupid. It means you're human. And staying with somebody that treats you badly because you're too afraid of what's going to happen if you try to do anything about it is not because you're not smart. It might be because you've learned that that's the best way to survive. Fear is real, and often after we get past this stage where we start to realize that this person really isn't who we think that they are, that this person really doesn't care about us, sometimes we're really stuck in these relationships, and abuse puts us into survival mode. And sometimes survival is just dancing the dance, is just figuring out how to collect that water from a raging river. And that has nothing to do with intelligence. I hope this video has helped you see things in a different light, and hopefully it has helped you get onto a road of working on seeing yourself differently and not seeing yourself as having been stupid to have believed a narcissist or to have stayed with a narcissist. But I also want to say in closing, and maybe I could have said this in the beginning, but most importantly of all, in my opinion, is even if you are stupid, even if you were really dumb and some kind of idiot, okay? Even if you were, it doesn't mean that you deserve to be abused. You didn't deserve what happened to you. Even if you were being stupid, you were doing the best you could with what you understood and what you believed and what people were telling you and what your life experience led up to you being able to understand about what was going on around you. You did the best you could. You didn't wake up in the morning and say, hey, I think I'll go get into a relationship with somebody who's going to ruin my life. That was not your intention. You did the best you could with what you knew. So even if you were stupid, it doesn't mean that you deserved this to happen. We have this idea in our head, I think, I don't know if it's a cultural thing, but we have this idea in our head that stupidity somehow means that we deserve to be punished. We deserve to be punished for being stupid. And stupid people deserve horrible things to happen to them, as if it is a choice to be intelligent or not. As if, somebody's going to say to someone, hey, why did you abuse that person and take advantage of them and ruin their life? And this person's going to say back, oh, well, actually, they were really stupid. Like, would that be a good reason? Would you say, oh, okay, well, then they obviously deserved it? No. So even after all I've said, I hope that you could see yourself as somebody that wasn't stupid, but was taken advantage of, whose emotions and normal vulnerabilities were taken advantage of. But even if you can't, even if you do believe that you were stupid, I hope you can see that that in no way ever meant that you deserved what happened to you. I hope this helps. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and comment below any ideas you have for me for future videos. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you like this video and would like to see more like it in the future. Until next time, thanks. Bye.